voice of purpose to a generation in need. Welcome to PickEd Speaks. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the new edition of PickEd Speaks, where, again, Black excellence speaks for itself. I am Dr. PickEd, your host for tonight, and again, tonight is bound to be absolutely amazing. If you thought last week was great, stay tuned for tonight, because the same three young men who joined us last week are on with us tonight. Of course, that's Dion McKinley, Christian McIntosh, and of course, Miles Jackson. And why not go ahead and bring them on in now? So I'm bringing in Dion, I'm bringing in Christian, and I'm bringing in Miles. Gentlemen, how are you doing this evening?
Good, and you? Doing great.
I'm good, thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you young brothers being on again with us tonight. I am so excited to kind of have you back. I was just really excited that the people wanted to hear from you all again. They really wanted to hear what you young brothers had to say. And I was just so excited about, bringing you all back. And so again, thank you all for being here. Before we hop into the conversation, I know that we had to cut the conversation short last week because unfortunately we kind of went overtime. And so before we kind of delve into the discussion for tonight, was there anything pressing on any of your brothers' hearts or minds that you wanted to share, that something that we did not get a chance, that you didn't get a chance to say last week, that it was really pressing on your heart, or something that's been tugging with you this week, that you or over the course of the week, you say, you know what, I want to make sure I share it. I want to get it off of me. I kind of want to put into the atmosphere. Is there anything specific that you want to kind of impart into this space before we actually go deep into our conversation?
Not that I remember, no.
Okay. All right. So let's go into it. So, Dion, I saw you come off mute. You had something?
I was gonna relay the same information that Christian just said.
Okay.
I didn't really have anything yet.
Okay. So let's go into the conversation. So last week we kind of went deep. The conversation of the topic was broken yokes of the new gen movement. And again, we discussed this conversation about what yokes were. Of course, these things that were worn on particularly oxen and those to kind of carry things from one area to another. They were this weight that they wore. And it was something that kind of held them down. It was something that kind of was, and we talk about it spiritually and theoretically. Again, as these weights and as these strongholds are these things, and what we talked about was your generation being the generation that's trying to lift those off and kind of change the narrative. And we talked about, do you have the space? Do you have the platform in order to share and have have those conversations? And so I kind of want to continue in that vein and start off with the question of, and I'll kind of start this with Dion. As we're talking about having the space and having the autonomy to share, your thoughts and your voice. How does having your voice, because you have to be young, you have a very strong voice. How does having your voice help you cope a lot of times with a lot of things that you see? Like, how does having your individualized voice and having the ability to speak, how does that help you maneuver through what you're seeing in the world right now?
I think for me, one of the main reasons why, like, I personally use my voice too, is because like trauma and things you see every day, it kind of builds up. For me, I'm lucky that naturally I like to release myself in talking and stuff like that. And I think it's very important because you have to allow yourself in order to have that voice or that space, you have to create it, obviously. And I think using your voice to create that space or set that tone, especially when you know a lot and you have a lot of information that you want to spread, I think it gives yourself a platform naturally, as opposed to just being quiet or maybe writing it down and posting on social media. When someone hears the tone of your voice it trying to change the person, because when you sit there and you talk about something on social media, you type it, no one's hearing how you say it. Everyone's reading it. So whatever way they take the information, so they take the information. If you're going to be on the platform and you naturally just create your voice and you just start talking in general, then if like you're trying to be serious and like, whoa, that was very serious. If it's very emotional, they'll be drawn to being emotional.
And Christian, if you could think about some person right now, who would you say is the most influential person that either in your life or just someone that you emulate or someone you look at and say, you know what, I appreciate their voice. I appreciate who they are, because, you know, they speak a truth. They speak, you know, who they are, you know, who in your life, either personally or just someone you admire that you see just kind of resonates with you as far as having a voice.
I don't think I really have anyone who is influential outside of people who are personal to me. But my parents, for one, they are influential to me. They are always pushing me to have a voice and then not to be shy about if I have an idea in my mind, then I express it out without hesitation. If I want to say something against another topic, and I do so without hesitation as well. They've always been the influential position in my life.
And how has I'm staying with you for a second, Christian. How has having that kind of encouragement and support, how has that been helpful as you kind of maneuver through, you know, what you're saying? Like, how is having that influence and having that support, how does that help you as you kind of maneuver through, you know, this journey of your life right now?
Same as when you have obstacles in your life, you know, you need a push, you know, you need something to keep you going through life, because there's always going to be obstacles. There's always going to be people trying to stop you from doing what's right, people trying to cast you away from the right path. You know, you need a good influence in your life for you to be able to keep going on that right path.
And Miles, both your mother and your father are very influential individuals, not just in your life, but in the lives of other young men and young women that they come into encounter with. Outside of your parents, do you have any persons that you emulate or you admire that you say, you know what, I appreciate the voice that they have. I appreciate who they are, not being afraid to speak, or they also give you courage to kind of also have a voice. Do you have any people outside of, again, maybe your mom and dad that you say, you know what, I love their voice, I love who they are and what they stand for?
Personally, I can't really say I've modeled myself after anyone or kind of focused my or the way I've molded myself around any one person. Simply because I feel like I don't want to be. I don't want to beat a dead horse with the things that I say or the things that I stand for. So I kind of try and make them my own. If something catches my eye and I feel like it's something that needs to be said, done, or heard, then I'll definitely, take or get after it. But I feel like it's something that I would have to go after genuinely. So I guess to answer the question, I don't really think I have anybody that I kind of actively take after in a way. I just kind of try to make my message my own.
Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, even if you don't necessarily have a person who you model yourself or things of that nature, always have someone that you can see that speaks to who, you can relate to. One of the individuals, and I talk about this person so many times. The one person that I relate to is Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin, if you don't know who that is, was an amazing individual who stood up for social rights, who stood up for blacks, for gays, for straights, for anyone who needed a voice. He was very influential in the March on Washington, one of the individuals who helped organize it. He was Dr. King's right-hand man behind the scenes. And the beautiful thing about Bayard Rustin, he was a behind-the-scenes person. He wasn't always in the front. And one of the things that you'll learn is that every person who's making impacts aren't always the people who are in front. Some of the people who are making some of the strongest impacts are the individuals who are behind the scenes making the deals and making sure that the things are happening the way it's supposed to happen. And so he, for me, has always been an inspiration. Just for who his life was. He lived unapologetically, and he also was an individual who spoke truth to power and was very clear about who he was. And so that's someone who not necessarily I imitate my life after, but he is an example of someone that I do see as an individual who I believe is an example of what having a voice is. And so my question, so I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, because this week, in the state of Georgia, we've been talking time and time again about, hate crimes. We're talking about, things have been going on. Well, it just so happens that here in the state of Georgia, this past week, the state legislature in the House and the Senate passed HB 426, which was the hate crime legislation. Georgia, before that was passed, was one of 5 states that did not have protections for those who were either for sexual orientation, for if you're a race, your gender. There just were no protections. And so now that Georgia has now passed that law, and I'll open this question for whoever wants to take it. Do you think that this legislation, it lessens the sting of racism and social equality? Or do you think that we still need to continue to fight and continue to make sure that we make our voices heard? What are your thoughts about that? Christian, I think go ahead. I saw you.
He took his mic off, so I thought he wanted to go. Okay, so I think that I don't think it lessens the sting of racism a lot, because it doesn't. No, it does. It does lessen the sting of racism physically, on a physical standpoint. What I mean by that is it doesn't. It does lessen the chance for violence to happen in racism. We always face that from time to time again with people who don't appreciate us, or people who degrade us by our color of our skin. They want to put hands on us or bring harm to us. But on a mindset basis, I don't think that doesn't really change, and because it's a law, it doesn't really change people's mindset. It actually, in my opinion, I feel like it brings more attention in that matter, because people now, they can't really express themselves through anger or violence, so they express it through other ways that can still harm us. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It can benefit us, but it doesn't really fix the situation entirely. We're leading to that point, but it doesn't fix the situation entirely.
Any of those?
I feel like it's definitely a step in the right direction. Personally, I feel like the fact that now that we are really taking steps to acknowledge hate crimes and the effect that they've had, not just on the Black community, but on communities in general, and the way they've divided the country as a whole, just on what's warranted or what's too far or what's not too far or what's underlying, what's systemic. I feel like this is really set like an outline, or it's set a restriction for, I guess, the way people could go about it. And I feel like there's no gray area anymore, and that's good. But what I can't say is that it lessens the sting of racism, because no matter how many laws we pass, racism has been, and it's, as honestly, realistically, it may always be a factor, just because that's something that would take many years to kind of grow out of as a society, as a country. But again, like I said, this is a step in the right direction. I don't want to undermine that. This is definitely a good way to go about handling the whole hate crime situation, especially with blatant hate groups like the Klan, for example. Just the fact that we're finally acknowledging that what they're doing is wrong, and the fact that despite what may quote unquote have been okay with at a certain point in time, it's not liable or it's not acceptable anymore. And I feel like just setting that boundary will be kind of a step in the right direction.
Dion, what about yourself?
I pretty much agree with the both of them. I think it's a small step, but we have a larger task to take. Kind of what Miles said, like we're just now realizing that the KKK, like not we're just now, but like as a whole, we're finally accepting the fact that they need to stop doing what they're doing. And I think if that took over a couple centuries, then I think that what we're doing right now is very minor and minuscule in comparison to the big thing we're trying to end, which is systematic racism. But it is very, at least like I appreciate the fact that they even made that, because a lot of times government will like try to make a claim or make a statement and they won't abide by it. So I'm kind of happy that they abided by what was going on.
And do you think that because what people need to understand is that, of course, it was what we call a bipartisan, meaning that it ultimately was both parties who were a part of this initiative. Do you think that it opens up conversation? Do you think it opens up conversation to now expressing to people, this is how we should be treated? Not just how we want to be treated, but it's how we should be treated. Do you think it opens up that conversation, or do you think we still have kind of some gray areas with that and ways to go as we start talking about social equality and social justice?
I think the ability to know how someone should be treated has always been open. I think it's still going to be kind of tainted with a little bit, because people always, like, I think after the age of like 17 or 18, you naturally know what's right or wrong. And I think for a lot of people naturally know what's right or wrong. Like people like that are like white supremacists and things of that nature, people who like are just naturally hateful to those groups. They obviously know that what they're doing as a societal thing is wrong. But I think what has been changing is the idea of someone thinking, maybe I should do this, because now we're in a space right now, everything's so like sensitive. So a person, before they release something now, they have to be like, wait a minute, let me stop, let me regroup, let me think what I'm doing. And also too, I like the fact that more and more people that are young are starting to believe that too, because now when the generations pass on and pass on and pass on, we'll see the gap of people growing in a racist household, like slimming down, because a lot of the people that have been like exposed or been posted on social media, they've been apologizing, but usually when they apologize, it kind of comes off as fake and or like unorganic. But a lot of times now, I'm seeing a lot of people who were caught in the act, and they weren't even like thinking. They're being more organic with their responses of apology. They're being more organic with the way they think and how they act and how they treat of that nature.
I like that answer. Let's shift gears for a quick second. We're about to go into a segment, a new segment. So for the viewers who are here, the last couple of weeks have been not necessarily our conventional programming. We will eventually start back starting next week, actually, for our full regular scheduling programs. But we are slowly but surely adding different segments in. So at this point, I actually want to add one of our first segments in there called Lunchbox Talk. So Lunchbox Talk is an opportunity for individuals to email us to be able to ask questions, and we discuss those questions for you. You can actually email us at speakout@sexynerd.co. Again, that's speakout@sexynerd.co. Send that email to us so we are able to have that conversation and maybe answer some questions that you may have. This particular question that was asked of us, we don't share the names of the individual unless they ask to have it shared. But this particular email that was sent, this particular parent who said she would be watching tonight knew that the young men were coming back to the live, and she wanted to ask them a question. And what her question was, she has a freshman. She has a son who is entering into his freshman year, and he is an only child, and he hasn't really been exposed to many things. She's kind of had him sheltered, and she's fearful. And not just from an academic side, but just from an emotional side. He's now moving into high school, and so that's a different social dynamic. And so she wanted me to ask you, gentlemen, what advice would you give to him becoming a freshman? Anything you've experienced your freshman year. Now you all are now seniors. do you have any kind of encouraging words for him? Any advice to give to him, or again, like I said, any nugget that you think would be beneficial for him? Again, someone who has not really been exposed to much, and now getting ready to kind of have his world opened. Now that could change because of the fact that we're not sure how the school systems are going to work right now as far as letting the kids come back to school. But even with that, what advice or what information would you give to this young brother to help him prep for his upcoming first year in high school? Miles, I'll let you take that.
Just from a personal perspective, something I had to realize going in is that something I really told myself going in is that change is good, but you don't have to change yourself for other people. What I mean by that is changing your mindset or changing the way you view things and kind of being adaptive and being able to mold in a way is good. But what you shouldn't do is, I guess, compromise your morals or compromise where you stand on things just because you're integrating into this new environment. You don't have to, quote unquote, relate to everybody. You don't have to, you don't constantly have to shape and mold your mental state around or based on the conditions of your environment, because then you'll really be in a situation where you don't know who you are at that point. So it's like, from me, just make sure you stay within yourself, be open, but make sure you don't change yourself to the point where you've lost yourself.
Christian.
I want to add on to that as well. Stay true to yourself, and don't let anybody else change who you are. But also surround yourself by good people who support you and help you get through rough times. You can't be surrounded by a bunch of fakes who act like they're your friends, but when you really do need them, they're not there for you. You always surround yourself with people who are there for you, and put education first. You can't just want to go out and party or go to a basketball game or a football game and you have a test tomorrow and it's a big one you haven't studied yet. Education always comes first, and you can worry about all the extracurricular things. That's for me.
And Dion.
I'm gonna say this. Make sure by your senior year you kind of know what you want to do. I think one thing our school systems do a lot of times is like to force the idea of simple education, the simple basic math, science, and history and English down your throat. And when you go through high school, well, for me, based on like the friends that I have, which are older in college and are young adults, they've always told me like a lot of the stuff that they learned in school, it was helpful, but at the same time it wasn't. So make sure you know and pick and choose what you want to do now, because for me, I'm kind of lucky. I'm in a space where I kind of know what I want to do. So my steps after high school are kind of already being structured naturally in my mind, so I can figure out what I want to do. But for a lot of students and teens, they go into universities and colleges not really understanding what they want to do, and so they spend 3 to 4 years just being there because that's what the social norm is. So just make sure you have an understanding of what you want to do, because it's okay to have different ideas based on what you want to do. Like for me, for example, I don't necessarily want to go to college unless I have an opportunity I can't refuse because of what I want to personally do and the steps that I want to take. But that's based off of me just knowing it from 9th to 12th grade what I've wanted to do and knowing the different steps it takes to get there. And so being able to know that separates yourself from people just naturally, because even if you guys are doing the same things when it comes to education, that natural ability to just know what you're going to do is going to elevate you in the long run because you already have a structured plan.
And Christian, you going back to something you said, making sure you put education first, and letting that be a focus. How do you encourage someone, or how do you speak to someone who may get boggled down, because I know me, I was one of those guys who always had to, make sure I had to, I almost wrecked my brain half the time trying to make sure if I got like an A-, I was about to pass out. If I got a B, I promise you I was that guy. I don't know what it was. If I I would pass out if I couldn't, get in. And I'm going to leave it alone. But I have a friend of mine who's actually watching right now, who knows that I was a stickler for grades, and he was too, and he got the better of it. But how do you encourage that person, even though making sure that you keep grades first, that you also have to make sure that you give your spells time, your space to breathe and space to kind of, not take everything so serious? How do you help that person who to kind of come off that ledge?
Well, you're supposed to work to your personal best, but you also have, like you said, have to have some breaks. I would sometimes, for me personally, I would give myself my free space or free time, like listening to music, like have things to relieve yourself of all that pressure of having to be on the top, having to be the best of the best. You need things to relieve yourself so that you're not stressed. Anxiety is tearing you down, so to the point where you can't actually be the best. You need things to relieve yourself. So yeah.
And no, I was going to ask you one to you, Miles. Go ahead. I think
Yeah.
coming you next, Dion.
I know what you just described all too well, especially being a student athlete. Just the work-life balance for me is what was always a struggle. Just trying to figure out how to kind of manage my social life, then my academic life, then my athletic career, basically. And trying to kind of juggle all three of those things without kind of, being out of it or taking a back seat to myself. Because I remember describing at one point it feeling like I had almost just left my own body and I was just observing my body just go around and doing things, just like being active in my life without me, So it's like, for me, something that I would strongly advise is to make sure that you don't lose track of, again, don't lose sight of the fact that academics is what you're there for, essentially, but also don't lose sight of the goal that you're also allowed to be human in that situation. I guess you don't have to constantly be on your own back in terms of, all right, make sure you get this done. And then if you, like you were just saying, if you got an A- or something, you're stressing about it. What my mom has always told me is that it doesn't matter if you got a 98A or a 76C, if you did your best and you did your job. So it's like, for me, that's the advice I would give to a student. Just like, if you did your best, you did your job. Because at the end of the day, your best is all you can give.
McKinley.
Yeah, this answer is cool because for me, being human in school is like literally my survival tactic. Because in school, naturally, I've always been a person where, like, when I'm in school, something about me, I just cannot sit there for 8 hours structurally when a person is telling me exactly what to do in that sense. Like, sometimes I have a mental breakdown where I just can't focus. I just literally sit there and I can't focus. So make sure you have your habits too, your different things and your different tools you need. Like for me, writing down verses, you doing art, listening to music, those are the key things for me that's been able to make sure my grades have stayed uplifted, because without those things I would literally go insane. Because just for me personally, allowing myself to still have that space of creativeness and still allowing me to do what I necessarily want to do in the same space, it allows me to just free myself, and it allows me to just relax and be like, okay, you're here for this job, you're here for this tool, but also know that you can do this and that, and you don't have to feel like a robot just doing something over and over and over and over again.
And I love how you said, make sure you find that thing that kind of keeps you grounded and kind of keeps you, like for me, even on this live, I'm one of those people where I have to have something in my hand. I have to, like when I was in school, I kind of had to have a pen. I had to have a pen. Like, so I'll always be putting something. Because again, you have to understand and know the mechanism that works for you. And I think you have to know what keeps you sane and what keeps you. And as an educator, I was very clear. Sometimes I used to have students have to go sit on the floor and do their work on the floor because they just could not sit at their desk all day. I had to. In one of my classrooms, I actually went and got high top tables because I had students who didn't like sitting down all the time. So they actually did work at the high top tables because they just worked differently. And so, yes, you have to find what works for you. Listen, I am enjoying this conversation. I'm enjoying what we're talking about. I hope you're enjoying it as well. Please make sure you're inviting people. We still have time, but we're going to take a quick break. Please invite people there. There's a video I want you to see. There's a commercial, kind of a message I want you to see. Please make sure you stay and listen to it. Be right back after this. PickEd Speaks. We'll be right back.
What did I do? Why'd you kill me? Did it even cross your mind that I have a family? Oh, what did I do to deserve this, please? Couldn't you hear me screaming? I could not breathe, but I guess that's alright. I'll be the sacrifice to change the whole wide world, all the way from paradise. Oh, don't you cry, so please dry your eyes. It's gonna get better, y'all. You keep the fight. Right now it's storming, the joy's coming in the morning, so it will turn around. So don't you give up now. Don't you cry, so please dry your eyes. It's gonna get better, y'all. You keep the fight. I know right now it's storming, joy's coming in the morning, so it will turn around. So don't you give up now, 'cause more than not a dream, that one day we'd be free. And even though I'm gone now, don't you stop believing. Don't you cry, so please dry your eyes. It's gonna get better, y'all. You keep the fight. Right now it's storming, joy's coming in the morning, so it will turn around. So don't you give up now. So don't cry for me, but just ride for me. Don't cry for me, 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 dry your tears, it'll be alright. Don't cry, but keep on fighting. Don't cry, you gotta keep marching, y'all. Whoa, ride for me.
All right, we are back to PickEd Speaks. That was Travis Malloy, Ride For Me. Please make sure you go check that video again. Again, it's on YouTube. He also has that song on iTunes and Apple Music. Please go catch that song. I think it's only 99 cents or it's like $1.99, but please make sure you go support that. He's an amazing artist, an amazing voice. He actually also just so happens to be the recipient of the foundation I have for Brighter Futures. He's the recipient of the second annual Voice of the Future Award for our second annual Bright Voices Honors, which we will broadcast live right here actually on Saturday, July 18th at 5 o'clock. So please make sure you tune to that as well. But coming back to this conversation, we're back with three amazing young brothers, Miles Jackson, Deion McKinley, and of course, Christian McIntosh. We are here discussing some amazing topics, and we're going to kind of stay in the same vein that Deion was kind of going in. This is actually part of our second segment. We're talking about education, more so college. And I'm so glad you kind of touched that, because one of the areas that we've been noticing is that a lot of people do push college as the option. I know, being someone in the K-12 environment, I've seen a lot of individuals, a lot of young people make the determination that they were not going to possibly graduate or even move on, because they felt as if the idea of college was so pushed upon them, especially if that wasn't necessarily the area they wanted to go into, that they felt that the only way to be successful was to go to college, and so they wouldn't graduate. But we're seeing more and more spaces of opportunities for trade schools and military and workforce development that are providing opportunities and spaces for young people to thrive and prosper. I want to stay with you for a second, Deion. When it comes about the conversation of college in the households, what do you think is the toughest conversation that families have about, should I or shouldn't I? And what am I going to do if I don't? What do you think the conversation is hard in certain families? And if you think it is hard, how do you think those conversations should actually go?
Yeah, that's definitely very hard. I think for me personally, having that conversation with my pops, who I live with in Boston, that was very tough one, because like just having that opportunity to tell him how I really feel about it, because for where I live, like for someone in the suburbs and stuff like that, like I've seen both spectrums. And when I lived in suburban areas, a lot of times the people that I was around, they didn't really need college per se. Like they had college, but if they didn't want to go to college, their parents could, set them up a little business, set up a little life opportunity. But in a city where I live now, a lot of people, their way out of where they're at is college. They take college and they go somewhere farther away from where they are right now, so they can get their mind away from, like with my dad, him moving to Georgia was his space to get away from everything. And I think for a lot of people it's tough, because they wanna be able to still have that sense of freedom, but without the sense of getting away, without the sense of education. So I think for certain people to have that conversation, you got to really just be honest. You got to get to a point where you say, I really don't care how they feel, because at the end of the day, you can't let other people control your life. Like for me, I've always been a person that really kind of rejected the norm of having everyone tell me necessarily what to do. I always want to be a person that can just think for myself first before I actually do the thing. So if someone told me to go left and everyone's going left, but I see that left is turning into a bad path, I'm going to stop and everyone's going this way, but I don't want to go this way. So I'm going to go this way because it's better for myself. So you have to really know, ask it to come down to what you want idealistically for your life. Because if your life includes you being a doctor, a lawyer, a scientist, that's one of those things where you kind of have to go to school to build that success rate up, because in order to get in those fields, you require certain things. But if you want to do something like music, art, maybe even being an entrepreneur, that's one of those things where you can kind of move away from the educational standard system and still have the ideas, because you just as much you can learn in school is the same amount you can learn in business, with books, with YouTube. Especially for me, I learned so much about YouTube, like a little bit myself. I'm a self-taught artist, and for me, I learned all the stuff that I did with art and music and stuff through YouTube. Without YouTube, I wouldn't have known any of those things. So I think different tools like that allows you to be in a space you can say, I can move away from college. You know what I'm saying?
And viewers, I actually want to hear from you as well. I want to hear your thoughts about the conversation of college and what that was like in your family and your household, as you being a child, so some of you adults. And then, of course, what is that conversation you're having currently? I know many of our watchers on here have young children or having young people who are getting ready to consider the conversation around college. What are some of those things that you all are talking about, and how are you having those genuine conversations? Miles with the fan club, you're next. yeah, you have a fan club here, so we'll let you go next.
Thank you. Well, for me, I feel like the hardest way to have that conversation would really to be just acknowledging whether or not it's for you, because I feel like just based on the way society has come to, I guess, revere college in a sense, just see it as the only path, and basically that, you know, the any other alternative is wrong kind of mentality is what's really kind of hindering kids now, because we're realizing, like, as society, as technology even moves forward, we're realizing that college isn't really the only option, because it almost seems repetitive in a way. It's like you're getting taught the same things, but also in a kind of a simulation of society, because we've all seen a college campus. It's free, it's thriving, it's basically teaching you how to operate in a modern setting, really. And I feel like at the same time, a lot of kids are like, okay, I know what I want to do, but college can't really do that for me. It can't provide that for me, because college is so restrictive in the way it kind of pushes knowledge out there. This is like, at the end of the day, like, think about it. If you were going down your list of majors, and there are a lot of kids, like I personally, one of my big schools right now is Alabama State University. I want to be a screenwriter. I've seen plenty of colleges with full-on screenwriting majors, and Alabama State wasn't one of them. And just, it led me to kind of this fork in the road, because it's like, athletically, Alabama State is where I want to be, because it's an HBCU with a high-performing baseball program. But at the same time, academically, it might take me a little bit longer to get to where I want to be from that aspect. So it's like just really kind of gauging what it is you want to do. And I feel like that's an issue now, because a lot of kids at this age, like Dion was saying, they don't know what they want to do. So I feel like college is kind of forcing kids into that, know what you're going to do, so when you get here, that's all you're working on. And what we have to acknowledge is that's not how humans work. We change, we evolve, we develop. So I feel like acknowledging the fact that college is kind of becoming restrictive and adding that into the conversation, like, okay, this is an option, but just know that it doesn't come with all of the freedoms it's associated with, you know? So it's like, but yeah.
And Christian, I'm coming to you next, but I have one quick question for Dion, because Miles hit something. And I know that, being someone who has stated that, you know, you're still trying to figure out if that route is for you. Based on what Miles was talking about, when you were having that conversation, as you were kind of piecing together where you were in high school, did you kind of take that journey and say, you know what, I'm not sure if that's the route I want to go, because everything that I want to do may not be in that direction? Was that a conversation you had with yourself?
Yeah. So basically, this is what happened for me. So when I was 16, I was playing basketball. I was playing basketball from the day I was born to about 16 in May, June. And June was a period for myself where I started not really loving basketball, because for me, I thought basketball was my first love, because I just been naturally good at the game. I've been through different opportunities, different things, do the sport that allowed me to remove myself from a lot of situations that I could have been in. And so for me, that year, I really started like really getting into my creative side, because that was a year where I started realizing that maybe basketball wasn't for me. Like, going through different obstacles and days where like you naturally don't really want to do the sport, made me realize I don't really love this as much as I thought I did. So that summer, when I went to Georgia, I made a decision. I'm going to stop playing basketball for this period of time and focus on the things that I thought were cool. And for me, I found an instant love for art and music. And so then from there, I was like, okay, I want to do this, and that, but I have to really figure out if I'm going to do that instead of basketball. I'm going to have to do have a plan and a rooted guide for me. So that's when I started talking to myself about going to college, because for me, my life before that was college playing basketball, coach. That was my life. College, coach. That's what I want. That was the steps I was taking. And I was like, well, since I don't want to do that anymore, now I have to actually sit here and make a plan in my head, or I'm going to fail at changing the way I wanted to be. And one more thing too, that Miles touched is when he was talking about him going to Alabama State and having not a big program in screenwriting. I think for a lot of people, one thing you need to know is that if you're going to a school and you don't get into the school because it's very high priced and it has like one of the best majors of that area, does not mean that you can't go to another program that's a smaller area and change the structure. Like for me, I love people that, and not just me, but American National loves an underdog story, a person who goes to a different school or a different outing that's lesser than what the natural state is and what people view as the high point and rising up. If like I said, like instead of going to a top school, you went to a community college, but you did so good in that community college that community college becomes another staple. Then they're gonna look at you as, well, his individual talent was so great that it rose up so that creates a legend for you, as opposed to going to a school that's very good and you get big later, but you're finally stuck. You're kind of stuck in the middle of the cracks there because there's so much things around you.
And I can't even say anything about that because you're so right. And I'm actually going to come back to the comment that you and Miles just made a second ago about HBCUs in 2 seconds. But I want to ask Christian, can get your name right. I want to ask Christian, when it comes to college and the importance of college in your household, and what has the conversation been in your home, and how has it influenced your decision as you're looking at what colleges to go to, as I'm sure college is your direction? What has that been? How has that journey been for you as you're now going into your senior year, making final decisions, and trying to map that out? How has the conversation of college been in your family?
Okay, so my situation is a little different from Dion's. I'm actually planning to go to college, and conversation has always been to push to go to college since my parents have already gone. Both my parents have gone to college, so they've always wanted me to go to college as well. So they've always pushed for that, and they pushed for HBCUs a little bit too because they've also gone to HBCUs. But they've always told me to be open-minded and to always go look for the college that is right for me. Now, I'm going to college not because of the popular belief that going to college is the right way to find a good career. Going to college is the only step to get into a good career. That's not the reason. It's because it's for the experience, because you need experience to, like Dion said, he didn't know how to, he hadn't gotten to his creative side until he actually looked into YouTube videos. He needed outside influence, outside teachings for that to develop and become his own thing. For me, I've always been a talented artist. I'm also self-taught, but I sometimes need outside materials, outside teachings to help me get better as well. But if I don't go to college, I don't really see any other way for me to gain that type of experience, that on-hands experience, other than going to college, other than going to the college that I want to go to for that type of major. So, yeah.
And as we discuss HBCUs, Miles, one of the most prestigious Black HBCUs, is one of the most prestigious HBCUs, Morehouse College, made an announcement that they were going to suspend fall athletic. So that's of course cross country and football. And which again, the conversation around people has been, okay, what does that look like for scholarships for young people who took that conversation, who were going to school for a scholarship and now they're necessarily play. What are your thoughts being an athlete, particularly an athlete who did not get a chance to even showcase this past spring because of COVID, and so you didn't get a real chance to play? As an athlete, what are your thoughts of the college unfortunately having to suspend athletics for this season and not knowing where it looks like for spring? What are your thoughts about that from an athletic perspective? You're on mute. There you go.
Okay. I've actually that's something I've had to come to grips with, especially because a couple days ago, the NCAA extended their dead period to August 31st for recruiting and showcases and stuff. So where it would have ended in July, it's now been pushed back a whole another month. So for me, just acknowledging the fact that my time is really, it's been shortened by a lot, because even with me going into my senior year, that was already a small amount of time, and now it's been shaved like significantly. So just kind of warring with that side of the athletic piece for me is a huge, I won't say an issue, it's an obstacle. Because issues are underlying and obstacles can be overcome. For me personally, just combating that, it's been really kind of stressful, I will say. And I don't like to stress about things, but it's been a real roller coaster, an emotional roller coaster, a physical roller coaster, because trying to make sure I stay in shape for playing, but at the same time not knowing if you really get a chance to step back onto the high school field, or even on the high school campus, just so you can really showcase from an academic and athletic perspective. And now the application process for colleges like that, just like even without the athletics, just applying, knowing what your real goal is, what your real motive is for going there, but having to apply and not really knowing if that's a certainty when you get there or not. That's harrowing rather. But yeah.
And staying with you with that piece, being someone who is not only athletically inclined, but you have a strong academic base as well. So even if ultimately your let's just so happen to say, and we're speaking all positivity in the atmosphere, that you will be well and great for the athletic season to come up. But if it just so happened that you were unable to do that showcasing and things of that nature, you still have an academic side of you. What does that look like for those young people who their main thing that's going to be their ticket out is that athleticism, and they ultimately cannot showcase that, and they don't have that strong academic piece that maybe get them to college? What do you think? How do you think that can, how does that create a struggle for that young man or that young lady who their ticket was athletics?
Yeah, that's a whole different beast. To start off, I'd rather say I'm blessed to not be in that situation, but at the same time, it is a situation that a lot of people are having to really come to terms with right now and having to go through and kind of, I guess, grind out, because at the end of the day, athletics has been a ticket out for plenty of people, even a lot of professional athletes. You'll hear, like, from my situation, athletics was my way out and it's my way back in. And that's another aspect that I want to kind of touch on, because like these kids that are getting into college athletically, they're not just going to go and just like, oh, well, I'm playing here. They're not just playing for themselves. They're more than likely playing for someone back home. They're playing for somebody that they've impacted through their sport, along with loving the sport themselves. So it's not only impacting them, but it's impacting the people behind them, which kind of leads me to wonder, what will college attendance in these lesser communities really look like now? Because it's like after COVID and you see, oh, say, for example, you're a 10-year-old kid. You play football, for example, football, basketball, whatever sport, and you have your 18-year-old older brother who is really looking like he could be a prospect for somebody's D1 or pro team, but COVID-19 happened. So now he's not getting scouted, and he really can never get in front of the right eyes. So now he's not going to college because he didn't get the opportunity athletically. Now this 10-year-old kid is like, oh, well, I guess football isn't the way to do it. And maybe the 10-year-old kid, like his 18-year-old brother, may not be as academically inclined. So now you're leaving this 10-year-old kid like, okay, so I can't go this way. I can't go this way. What are my options? And that's an issue, because like, I feel like we've been told so many times that athletics is your way out. For some people it is, but for plenty it isn't. And I feel like just teaching kids nowadays, just how to leverage the opportunities they have, leverage the talents they have, and knowing that they don't have to fit into a certain mold to kind of get to where they want to go. Again, touching back on Dion's point, maybe college isn't right for you, or maybe the workforce isn't right for you. Maybe this just isn't the path you need to take. but yeah, just to sum it all up, that can really take a hit on, I guess, dwindling communities just in terms of college attendance, because these kids, they're not just playing for themselves, they're playing for people back home, they're playing to inspire, but they're also playing to love the game again. And that's what I feel like is kind of being lost in the whole mess of pandemic and, everything.
And I think goes back to Christian, your point, when you had the conversation about we have to also, in spite of everything else, we have to continue to put education at the forefront of our focus. When we are, we go to school, yes, to engage in all the social constructs, but we also have to make sure that at the end of the day, the educational piece, now, not necessarily say you have to, get all, you want to do the best, as Miles said, do the best you can, but also taking to Dion's point, you want to keep getting that educational piece and get all that knowledge you can, so that you then can determine what it is you want to do, because you don't want to shortchange yourself and not know because you didn't give it all you had. And so now you may have lost a space because you didn't give it all. But we only have a couple of minutes left, and I did want to ask Christian you this question because you kind of brought it up as well. When you're talking about HBCUs and your parents attending HBCUs, but also making sure you're keeping your mind open. I went to an HBCU. I know many people who are watching who went to HBCUs. I also went to a PWI for grad school and for a doctoral program, and so I know both lives. But growing up where I came from, I've shared this story. I didn't know much about me, and as a Black man, as just as a Black individual, and I felt that going to this HBCU would help me, and I think that was my choice and my decision for doing that. And I love the camaraderie. I might get chastised for saying this, but I'm sorry, there's no homecoming like HBCU. So with all of that, all of this experience that I had, as you are making your decision, what has been your challenge, if anything, with determining HBCU over PWI?
Okay, so for most people, it varies on what they want to do. When I'm thinking about if I want to go to HBCU or PWI, I don't really look at other people's perspectives, where they would say in the HBCU they had they made more relationships, or they had a meaningful experience, or they were able to absorb more culture there, versus in the PWI, some people may say, oh, you have a better chance at life there, or you have more opportunities there. I don't really look at that. I just look at what's best for me, how if it will benefit me more in the long run. That's about it.
And Miles, your take.
For me, I feel like there's often a stigma behind HBCUs versus PWIs, because PWIs are honestly, they're considered more prestigious, whereas HBCUs are often considered more, I guess, raw in a sense. Just kind of, there's a raw energy about it. But I feel like there are upsides to both, and there are downsides to both. But for me, frankly, as an African American male, I feel that an HBCU route would be more, I guess, it would be better for me personally, simply because I don't want to brainwash myself in an environment that really was never suited for me. I feel like HBCUs are often looked down upon when it comes to not just academics but athletics. Like a conversation I was just having with another one of my teammates the other day was, even despite all of this COVID mess, what if the African-American athletes, these big-time D1 prospects, were, as opposed to going to the PWIs and getting the, I guess, national coverage or whatever, but I mean, getting the same experience that they would in the HBCU college athletically, what if they decided to kind of reroute and go to an HBCU and kind of lift those schools up, as opposed to taking the default route to a PWI and getting the publicity, as opposed to taking the HBCU route and getting the authenticity, if that makes sense. Getting the, I guess, the energy, the feel, the sense of community, the culture, because that's really where our culture lies. And I feel like just as an African-American male, I would be doing myself a disservice to consciously choose a PWI over an HBCU that could give me the same, if not a better opportunity. But yeah.
And the beautiful thing that I love about these three young men is that they have, again, at where they are currently, if nothing else, they have made a conscious decision about what it is specifically that they want to do. Now, some of the routes and some of the journeys may differ, and some of the ways to get there may change. But the beautiful thing about it is, and Dion has said this throughout this conversation, is you have to make sure you find what works for you and what's for you. And you have to make sure that you blaze your own path. I want to give you brothers the floor. We're ending here. I want to give you the opportunity to leave any last and parting messages to the people. They have got a chance to see you 2 weeks straight. And so what's that last thing that you think you will want the people to hear? I'll go Dion, I'll go Christian, and then I'll go Miles.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you for the opportunity. This has been pretty cool just to be a part of this space and this atmosphere with my fellow friends and stuff that I don't get to see all the time. And it's just been a good experience. One thing I'm gonna say to just people in general, adults and kids, allow yourself, especially in this space and time of peace, not necessarily in the world, but peace in the sense of everybody's laid back. They forcefully can't do anything. Allow your mind to just flow creatively. Don't let this time scare you when it relates to money, when it relates to jobs. Allow yourself to just sit back at least for a couple hours a day and meditate on thoughts, because I know for a lot of people, like for my pops, he always looks back and says, imagine, I wish I did this, I wish I did this. I think for everyone, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always go back and do something. There's always been people who realized what they wanted to do when they were kids and they never did it, and they go back and do it when they're older, and they realize, dang, if I did this when I was younger, I could have captured that experience. So allow yourself this space time to sit there and meditate on your thoughts and meditate on what you actually want to do. Because at the end of the day, in this short life we live, if you're just doing something as a robot, you're gonna experience life as a robot. You're not gonna really experience life the way you want to. If you experience it the way you want to do it, and everything you do is your choice without you having to feel like you're stuck and congested, I think that's way more beautiful. Like for me, one of my examples of that is just watching people around me or people that I see every day who don't live in the same ideal space that I want to live in future-wise, but they are so happy because all they do is just sit in a space where they chose to live that way. They chose to move that way, as opposed to someone who's in a higher state, but they've only been in that higher space because they were forced to do that when they were younger. So they're not enjoying it the same way the person who's not living in the same way as them is. So, yeah.
Thank you, young brother. Christian.
I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be on this platform with you and my friends. I would probably just say, for the young brothers who are coming up in the world, don't let people tarnish your view of life. If you have a mindset of something, go for it. Don't let other obstruction or obstacles tarnish your viewpoint or mess you up, because that won't let you evolve. That won't let you improve in life. That's all I have to say.
Awesome. Thank you, my brother. And Miles.
I'd like to follow suit first by saying thank you for the platform again. This has really been huge, especially for it to be a two-parter. Personally, for me, just for closing remarks, to follow suit with what Dion said, don't close your mind to creativity, because I find that that's happened all too often in plenty of my social circles. I feel like creativity is something that can really kind of expand, or is something you can expand upon in multiple different ways. Really, you don't have to restrict yourself to a certain avenue. Honestly, at the end of the day, in this time we have alone, I'd say reflect and reevaluate. Because if you're not living, you're dying. If you're not creating, you're destroying. If you're not building, you're breaking. And I feel like there needs to be a constant sense of progression as we move through this whole quarantine situation. So always be working on something. Always be mentally or physically busy, but don't be overwhelmed. Take this time to positively reinforce yourself, if that makes sense.
And again, I am just, as we're seeing these messages pop up, I share the same sentiments of all the individuals. I am ever so proud of these young brothers. If I've never been more encouraged before to know that our future was in good hands, I can honestly say that if nothing else, these are 3 examples of absolutely amazing young men. And I want to give a shout out to D'Angelo Cardwell. I know he doesn't want to get shout out, but I want to send a shout out to D'Angelo, because on the last live, after the last live, this brother did something absolutely amazing. And he really blessed these 3 young men just out of the kindness of his heart, and provided, just something to them, and just kind of gifted them and loved on them and poured into them. And so, Brother Cardwell, thank you so much for, again, continuously putting, action behind words, and making sure that you let young people know that they are valued. And so if you, by chance, want to follow suit, if you want to contribute and want to give to these young brothers, I have a Cash App here, I have the information here, please give so that I can then give to them. Hey, let's do it again for another week in a row, shall we? I have no problem. Let's just keep blessing these young brothers and letting them know that we care. So if you want to follow suit and do the very thing that Brother Caldwell did, please make sure that you send something today so we can make sure that we are blessing these brothers, because, again, it's our job to make sure that we're supporting them. So please make sure that if you, by all means, want to do so, again, you can do that. I want to, again, thank these young brothers for, again, giving up their time. It's a lot to ask teenagers to give up their time on a Monday in the evening between 7 and 8 o'clock. That's a lot to ask. And so, again, they did it 2 weeks in a row. So we truly, truly appreciate these young brothers for giving up their time. I'm actually kind of surprised that Dion didn't come with a different head wrap today. I was expecting something. I was expecting some kind of head wrap. I don't know what happened. And so I said we had yellow. So I'm kind of upset that he didn't come with something. But I have grown to truly, truly. There we go.
Human washcloth.
There we go. I have truly, truly, truly come to enjoy and love these young brothers. And so we are so grateful. Listen, if you want to know who's coming up this week, pay attention to this really quickly. I'm sorry, if you want to know who's coming up this month, coming in July, pay attention to this. And many, many more will be coming away. We'll be announcing those very, very soon. Again, on behalf of everybody here at PickEd Speaks, thank you all so much for watching. Until we meet again, we'll see you next week. Holla. Oh, no, Dion, Miles, you got something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Mr. Cardwell as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to say that too. I really appreciate that. That was very generous.
Thank you,
Yes, we appreciate you, brother. We appreciate each and every one of you all. Please make sure you follow us. You'll know how to follow us in 2 seconds, because the announcer will tell you. Until we meet again, God bless you. God keep you is my prayer. And remember that Black excellence always speaks for itself. Have a good night.